Hi, I'm Elavida, and welcome to the Soulful Deep Dive podcast. So, today is going to be a conversation and an invitation. It's an invitation to remember that justice doesn't just live in policies and systems, it's liberation that we don't just think our way into, it's really our voice. It's not just something that we use, but something that we inhabit and embody. So, my guest today is Meghan Field. She is a magic maker, activist, mother, warrior, dancer, connector, coach, alchemist, and keeper of light, justice, and power. She's spent her entire life amplifying the voices of others, which is why I really needed to speak to her today. And she's done things from building the first lending library in Central America to leading strategic work to end violence against women and girls here in the UK. And yet, like so many women doing really deep, important work, there came a moment where the cost of living solely in her head had become too high. And as we begin to become burnout and disconnected, doing such purposeful work, it was time to retreat and to move through the body, through movement, through ritual, ceremony, land, and lineage. And I know she's going to fill you in on this so much more. So, welcome so much, Meghan. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I love being a podcast guest. I don't get enough times to be a podcast guest. I used to have one of my own, and for years I interviewed people, but to be interviewed is a true delight. So, as a double air sign, a Gemini sun and a Libra moon, I
Fantastic.
love talking, and I know you do too. So, I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
It must be the Libra moon. No, it's Libra rising. I've got Libra rising. But yes, there's the Librian bit, and it definitely makes us very sociable and chatty. And I love that.
Absolutely.
Now, we met last year at one of your women's circles. So you were running, was it a red tent that you had at Barefoot Festival up in Leicestershire?
Yes, yeah, I've known Louisa Darling, who has is the creator of Barefoot Festival and many other festivals, including the Witch Festival in Cornwall and in Leicester. And I've been working with her for years. She has very kindly asked me to be part of many of her gatherings. And yeah, I came to your singing workshop, and I taught Qoya and ran a tea ceremony and a couple of different rites of passage and workshops at Barefoot Festival. I can't do any one thing. I must do multiple things.
Yeah.
That's the Gemini sign. I'm doing all the things, and all the things. I get really jazzed about all the things. So yeah. I think we met in person at Barefoot, but I knew we being transplanted Cornish women.
Yes.
Knew of you through various mutual friends and connections. So it was really nice to finally meet you in person over the summer.
And you too, because I'd heard so many good things about you as well. In fact, I was even talking about you a couple of weeks ago with two completely different random women that through your work and through circles. And we all came to the same conclusion because I'd said that and actually the women followed it up with exactly the same advice. I wanted to actually share this with you because it's so lovely to have that kind of feedback. Is I was saying how that you really not only do you really embody everything you do, but you're really confident with it. And I feel like when you walk into a room and you can feel your presence and there's so much power and energy and confidence behind it, I can understand so much why you work with charities and violence against women, because what you do when you walk into a room and just being yourself is you inspire other women to do the same. So you came into a workshop after I'd done mine, and I watched you when you started, and I was like, "Oh, I needed to see that today. I really needed to see that today." You were just like bam, 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 bam. Everything was just brilliant. You totally owned the room. Everything was organized. Everyone felt comfortable. You got all the kind of, formalities out the way quite quickly. And it was just fantastic. And I shared with my friend, I really needed to see a strong, powerful woman step up and just run it like it should be ran. And it was just amazing. And a couple of other my friends said separately, they were like, yeah, she does that. She doesn't even know that she's doing it sometimes, but she just naturally, that's like your magical special power. So I really wanted to share that with you.
Oh, thank you so much. I receive all of that with real gratitude. And that's the Virgo rising. I'm a Virgo rising. So like I'm perceived as being organized, but it's all mashed potatoes up in my perimenopausal brain and little ducks flapping under the surface. But I think all of this is a practice, right?
Mm,
Life is a practice. And I think when I first started holding space in earnest about a decade ago, I certainly wasn't as well practiced as I am now in holding space. What I had already learned was how to speak publicly, and I wasn't always good at that either. That was also a practice I had to learn. But my career in ending violence against women and girls and speaking out against intersecting social injustices prepared me to be able to hold space in circles in a number of different ways. Holding space for accessibility, holding space for inclusivity of all people. And it also taught me that when you slow down, take a deep breath, pause for a moment, and speak from the heart in an authentic way, whether I'm, giving a talk at a Reclaim the Night march, or whether I'm leading a group of women through an exploration of what does that crone, that inner crone part of us,
mm,
look like and feel like, and how do we express it in a circle for women aged 20 to 70. Like it's all one and the same. It's part of a continuum, I suppose,
mm,
in my life. And the stepping forward into all that was never the issue. It was, for me, it was like, this is what I was born to do, whether it's in social justice and whether it's in more of my, I would suppose, more of my spiritual well-being world of work. It's all the same. And but it just like I didn't always speak as strongly. I didn't always hold space in an organized way. But I do think what I bring to both or all areas of my life really is doing it in a mindful way,
mm.
and doing it in a way that I would like to be held. I think I hold space like I like to have space held for me. And that comes, I think, with, real thoughtfulness and consideration. I don't do anything, I do most things intentionally. I don't do things by accident. And hopefully that comes across in a way that makes people, when they step into, if I'm sharing a meeting, or I'm, holding an in-person workshop or running, a weekend-long retreat, hopefully when people walk into the space with me, they over time, maybe not immediately, I don't expect anyone to kind of feel it immediately, but maybe over time they settle into themselves. And
Mm.
I never say in any of the spaces I hold, I never say like this is a safe space, because safety is a feeling, right? And
Yes.
I don't know your nervous system, right? I don't know what
Yes.
safety is for you. I can't know that, especially if I've just met you. So I
Yes.
don't say I'm going to guarantee you feel safe because I can't guarantee you feel anyway. No
Mm.
matter what I do, you might feel angry, you might feel sad, you might feel pissed off, you might feel like liberated. I don't know how you're going to feel, but what I can promise you, what I can take responsibility for is how I feel and the kind of space I'm going to hold. So we always set community agreements. I set community agreements before workshops in a corporate setting. I set community agreements in every women's circle. We gather in a space intentionally, and then I hold myself accountable to those agreements, and I will hold you and pull you forward into them as well. And I think that makes a difference. So like you'll
Yes.
never hear me saying I'm going to heal you.
No.
You're never going to hear me say I'm gonna like this is this come and work with me. It's a safe space. I do think that people feel safe as a byproduct of the type of spaces that I create. But that takes so much. That takes my 30 years of
Mm.
experience doing all sorts of social justice work, trauma informed work before we even use that phrase, and then also being in space, being in
Mm.
really good space where I felt okay, where I felt like I belonged, where my nervous system did dial down, where I felt like I could go on that journey, as I say, loads from my head to my heart and the rest of my body and show up as a full person. Like I've done that and I continue to do that for myself. And then I think I can attempt to do that for other people.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And is that then where it all started for you? So working within social justice and working out as you're connecting with people, that you're doing that from, because you were talking before about being too much in your head and having to drop into your heart, because obviously you're leading these really big things, and I mean, you're an absolute powerhouse, Megan. And so did you feel, when was there a point, because I remember you saying something about burnout before, where you had been up in your head and doing so much, as well as being a mother and just running so many things. At what point did you feel that you had to slow down, that you had to, because I'm surely, when you're going through that, your nervous system starts to go, oh, how much of this can I actually handle? And we start to burn out. So at what point did you go, right, okay, I need to go inward? And what did that look like for you? And what tools did you use to help you?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, definitely. Okay. So I moved to the UK in 2006. I moved because I moved for love. And I met my now ex-husband when I was doing some social justice work in Nicaragua. And so after a year of knowing him, I moved over here to London, starting off in London, and worked in domestic abuse and sexual violence. I ran a charity in central London. Then I went into more strategic work for local and central government. And in that early part of my career, I was here for 3 years. And then in 2009, my son was born. He's now 16, which is bonkers to me.
Wow.
And so, when he was young, we moved out to Surrey. And I was the kind of person, because my work, I often think about my work. There's this beautiful quote from Rev Angel Kyoto Williams, and she says, "Love and justice are not two. Without inner change, there can be no outer change. Without collective change, no change matters," right? And so my social justice work, like I always, like from the time I was really little, flashback to when I was a little girl, I was I was like a feminist. I wanted to be the second female Supreme Court justice on the American Supreme Court, because I was like, why is there only one? There needs to be more. I was like, gender injustice was a big thing for me. And I started speaking out against relationship abuse in my teens, because I saw all my friends going through it. And I had some shitty relationships when I was in my teens as well. So flash forward, I've lived in Nicaragua. I've got my master's. I'm in London. I'm working in the domestic abuse sector. I'm moving my way up. I'm a mom to a child who, by the time he was 7, it's his story to tell, but by the time he was 7, he was diagnosed with Asperger's, high functioning autism, and my pathway to parenting wasn't traditional, but and at the same time I was working full time in this social justice work that again was my love. I loved it. I was so dedicated to it. Like for me, violence against women and girls is both the cause and consequence of gender inequality. And so in my professional feminist brain, I'm like, the way I'm going to address gender inequality is through the lens of ending violence against women and girls. So I have this big job in London. I'm really good at it. I'm making strides. I'm doing lots of stuff. I'm trying to parent a neurodiverse kid. I'm in a relationship, which I now know was incredibly narcissistic and controlling. And it got to the point where I was, basically when sort of around like 2015 or so, I was like doing yoga challenges. Like everything was hard. Like I had to do like 30-day, 60-day yoga challenges. I had to be the best. I had to keep getting promotions. I had to be the best, be the best special needs parent there was. And like all of that, by the time like about a decade ago rolled around, I was not great. I was having migraines frequently. I was having panic attacks. I was probably a bit of an unpleasant, anxious person to be around. I had really high anxiety. And I remember I thought, okay, you know what I'll do? I'll go, a good break from all this corporate stuff. I'll go and, do some yoga teacher training in India. I'll go for 2 weeks, I'll have a break. And I remember going to India and with my one of my most favorite people on the planet, Leanne Perry Ferreira, who's an amazing yoga teacher in the Surrey area. And we went to Rishikesh. And I remember like going through some of the training and being like, this is just, I love yoga, but I love how Leanne teaches it, which is philosophy. One of my undergraduate degrees is in philosophy. I love philosophy. I love all of this. I don't love holding my body in any one way. Like, and all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute, I'm noticing my body. But in a negative way. So I'm in Rishikesh and I'm just like, all of these dudes teaching a bunch of women how to move their body and how to live and like all this morality, all this bullshit. And I was like, and as the time in Rishikesh went on, I was feeling deeply uncomfortable, and I was like, this
Mm.
was a mistake. So I remember writing in my journal, when I was in India, I just want to find a practice. Like, it feels like something's coming online in my body here. Like, I want to find a practice that feels more feminine, that feels more feminist, like that takes me into my body. Because I realized, I mean, I think I had like 3 migraines when I was in India, like even when I was supposed to
Yeah.
be like relaxing and doing yoga, I was still like activated all the time up in my head. And so I wrote that in my journal. And then a year goes by, and I meet Lisa Lister. I read Code Red, and I was like, what menstrual cycle? Like, what is all of this? Like, I'm deep into my 30s now, and I knew nothing about this. And
Mm.
and then I spent some time with Lisa, went to a curvy yoga class, and I was like, oh my God, you can do yoga in a way that's feminine, but also social justice oriented. So then I like started finding all of these like, amazing teachers from the States, like Jessamine Stanley, who were creating spaces for a variety of bodies, a variety of people, creating like, kind of queering yoga. And I was like, oh, this is better than that Rishikesh thing. This is more
Yeah.
me. And then I did a retreat in Malta with Lisa Lister. And I just was like, just we did some yoga with her, but it wasn't like any yoga I'd ever done before. Again, it was like this getting out of my head and not worrying about
Mm.
what my body was doing or looking like, and more about how did this make me feel. And I was like, oh, this is my street more. And I just happened on that retreat to meet the wonderful Ebony Allard, who's become over the last decade a really close friend of mine. And a few months after the retreat, Ebony and I met in Glastonbury. It's the first time I'd ever been to Glastonbury, and we were walking up the tour, and with my son in hand, and I was like, Ebony, I need some podcast recommendations. I'm doing these long school runs. My son had just switched schools. I'm doing these long school runs. I need some inspiration. She's like, oh, my old PA, Sarah Stars. You need her, the Girl Gangs Conversation podcast. You got to listen to her. So as the breadcrumbs of serendipity work, she had like a bunch of episodes, and I just kind of like, oracled that shit. I just
Yeah.
scrolled down, picked one. And the first episode I listened to was with Rochelle Sheik. Rochelle is the founder of a practice called Qoya, which is based on the idea that through movement, we remember that our essence, like nature, is wise, wild, and free. And I listened to Rochelle talk, and I was like, I don't know what Qoya is. It's Qoya, and it means queen in Quechuan.
Oh,
And
wow.
I immediately Googled and found the wonderful Kate Taylor, who was teaching a class within a few days' time down in Shoreham. And I was living in Surrey at the time, so it was about an hour. And on a Sunday afternoon in 2016, I went to Shoreham and I did my first Qoya class. And by the time that class was ended, I had decided that I was immediately, like full body reaction, I'm going to be a teacher and I'm going to start my training immediately. And that's what I did. Within a month, I had completed the introduction, and within 12 months, I had qualified in Costa Rica as a teacher trainer, as a teacher. And now I'm a teacher trainer. I'm the only teacher trainer of the full program of Qoya here in the UK. And it has, when I say there's lots of pivots, lots of different chapters of my life, and finding Qoya has changed my life irrevocably. Uh,
Wow.
and when the question that you asked, Ella, was around, how did I go on that journey from my head to my heart? Like,
Yeah.
Qoya opened that up for me in a way that I only can now look back and say I'd been searching for probably my whole adult life. And there's no going back.
Yeah.
I cannot not be in my body anymore.
Yeah.
And it was Qoya that got me through a really difficult, like 2 really difficult years. So like 2017, I lost my sister-in-law, my brother's wife, and a few months after that, I lost my son's namesake, who was like a grandfather to me. And I hadn't really
Mm.
ever lost, like I lost my grandparents when I was young, but like as an adult, like these two people that owned such a big part of my heart left their physical bodies, and
Yeah.
Qoya let me stay with grief. in a way that
Ah,
and let me come back to grief and let me feel in a way that I would have just pushed down because that's what I had been doing. That's
yeah.
why my body was freaking out. That's what the migraines was about. That's what, the panic attacks were about. That's what my body was always rebelling because I didn't allow myself to feel. I pushed those
Yeah.
feelings down. I got them out of the way. If they were inconvenient for me or anyone else around me, if they prevented me from being the high functioning person that I needed to be and do the thousand things and push and push and push and push my body without even acknowledging that, what it was being done to it. Like Qoya was like, we're done with that now. There's no more of that.
Yeah.
And so it helped me, like Qoya as a practice, as an embodied movement practice, helped me, and so much more. And the community around it helped me deal with grief. Qoya was absolutely the reason. Well, no, I wouldn't say the reason, but it was the pivot that helped me leave my ex-husband.
Is that
After,
because you felt like you were coming, obviously, if you're in a narcissistic relationship, where you felt like you were getting to know yourself again? Because I know being a victim of narcissistic abuse myself as well, is that it can be that you forget who you are. You start to
yeah,
forget, it chips away and you start to forget who you are. So do you feel like coming back into your body was bringing you back into a sense of wholeness of who
yeah,
you are and that you have the power within you? And then that's what helped you through that?
100%. I felt like I was living a divided life. So I
Mm,
would, my ex-husband traveled a lot for work. And so we didn't spend, and that's probably why we stayed together as long as we did, because he was away for work a lot. And so,
mm,
but when he was around, I was a different person.
yeah.
Like on the weekends, I would become, the married Megan, and the rest of the time I was single mom Megan with my kid and doing all the stuff that made me happy. And
Mm,
then he would come home and I felt like I was in a cage.
mm,
But I didn't know that's how I felt until I
yeah.
started to feel. And so
Yeah.
once I started to feel, and I suppose on a number of levels, was reminded what love actually is and what it feels like, particularly love for myself. And
Yes.
when you kind of realize that, when it's like, when that veil lifts, for me, it was next to impossible to continue.
Yeah.
As hard as it was to imagine not being in that marriage, it was even harder to imagine like staying.
Yeah.
And that's, and has been no walk in the park, let me tell you, trying to co-parent with a person like that.
Yeah.
But if I hadn't come back to myself, I would never have been able to leave that, and I would have stayed and been incredibly unhappy for a really long time. And I don't even recognize, like, I look at pictures of myself prior to 2016, and I'm like, Jesus, Mary and Joseph, I look nothing like I do now.
You shared something about that recently. I saw that post actually. Yeah. And it's interesting, isn't it? When we start to do this work, or we've done this work for a long time, when we start to look back to those times, or something reminds you of those times, or you see someone that knew you in those times but hasn't seen you for the last 10 or 20 years, what that triggers in you, and you think, wow, I don't even recognize that person. That person is almost like a totally different person. Not that there was anything wrong with that person, but it's just we can change so much doing this kind of deep work and getting back to a sense of reclaiming our own self-worth. I think a lot of it.
Okay. And
And
but that is, and what a gift that is. Like, and
yeah,
I realize, and I recognize the gift and the privilege of that. I really do, because
yeah,
not everyone, and I know this especially, not
mm,
everyone is safe to leave
yeah,
those kind of relationships. It's why I have a job, unfortunately. And currently I'm the strategic lead for ending violence against women and girls, domestic abuse, and sexual violence for the city of Plymouth. And I know how hard even that was for me to leave that relationship. And I was working in the sector, y'all. You know what I mean?
yeah,
It was so hard. And I recognize the privilege in being able to do that. And I understand that it's not, it's incredibly difficult and incredibly unsafe for a lot of people.
yeah.
And I just want to recognize that, and also to speak to anyone, if you are listening and you are in a relationship that involves narcissistic abuse, that involves coercive control, that involves any form of violence or abuse. I just, from my heart to yours, like, there is support available for you
Yeah.
everywhere across the UK. There is support available. There are specialist independent services that, even if you have no idea how you're going to go, or even if it would be possible, and knowing that the most dangerous time is when you leave, there are people and services and folks anywhere that exists in the UK, to support you through it. And I'm really grateful that I get to, in my work now, I get to commission and work alongside these brilliant services that support thousands of women and men, non-binary folks a year, who need it. It's unfortunately a very ubiquitous experience. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 6 men will experience some form of abuse in their lifetime.
Yeah.
14 women lose their lives to domestic abuse every week in the UK. 14 women. And that's
Wow.
as a result of homicides, suspicious deaths, or dying by suicide. So this is a massive issue. It's a massive problem. And I know plenty of people who've worked in the sector who've also experienced, coercive control and forms of narcissistic abuse and all other forms of abuse. It's that ubiquitous. So, I think that I like I said, I feel like, I wouldn't say lucky. I am, I say I'm privileged because, I have a number of, of intersectional privileges that I get to move through the world with. And I recognize those, like I'm able-bodied, I'm middle class, I'm educated, I have a good job, those are all things that that made it easier for me, I think, to leave. But that decision was agonizing, and I was very scared and very worried about leaving, but I would never have gotten to that point had I not done, I guess, got done for me what I suppose is the kind of core of the work that I invite people into,
Yeah.
which is slowing down, getting clear on who you are and what you need, and then acting, choosing to move through the world in a congruent way. The first step is the slowing down, understanding, not through fear or anxiety, or I would say, ego is important in some respects, but like not through like the shoulds or the influence, the conditioning, right? But
Yeah.
through like the Mary, no, it's not Mary, but Megan Watterson, who's written a number of books, including lots about Mary Magdalene, says calls the heart of your heart's the holiest of holies.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean. Like, that's the clarity. That's the source that through my body, I've been able to connect with and listen to. And that's what I try to invite people into. Like, what is your holiest of holies? The heart of your heart, say and want, the part of you that isn't, that, if you put what other people have told you you should do, what you think you should do, like all of that, all of like the socialization, when you put all that to the side, like what is your holiest of holies want for you?
Yes.
And then how do we create spaces to listen to that? When we're in a sacred space, like we're in a circle, when we're in a workshop, when we're in a retreat, and then how do you create those sacred spaces in your day-to-day life where you can choose and act congruently in a way that aligns with your heart and the holiest of holies?
And there must be a lot of crossovers in your work, because everything that you're saying is not just great for all women everywhere, but particularly ones that have had to, say, run from domestic abuse as well, in that kind of side of work that you do as well. So do you find that there's quite a lot of crossovers? Do you find that you're bringing a lot of the work and even some of the body work into some of the other work that you do?
Absolutely. I think, I look at my work as a continuum, right,
Mm.
of empowerment.
Yeah.
And I say yes, but like I don't do. I sit kind of like at the top of a strategic pyramid, so I don't do the frontline work anymore. I work with the people that do. I
Yeah.
chair multi-agency meetings all the time. Today, I chaired a multi-agency meeting for high-risk, high-harm perpetrators. I stepped in for a detective inspector from the police and shared that meeting to try to hold people who are harming others accountable, right?
Mm.
So I don't necessarily, I do some research, and I'm always talking to survivors because of,
Mm.
we're everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Um, but in terms of like when I'm like, so I go to a lot of meetings, but in those spaces, I'm conscious that there are survivors in the room. A lot of
Mm.
people who work in the sector and in adjacent work have experienced some form of violence and abuse. So I try to bring that, and I try to bring my embodiment work and my well-being work and my spirituality more and more to my more corporate work, I would say, working for the local authority and with other people from statutory and voluntary and community services. And of course, I bring all of that knowledge of trauma and abuse and systems and systemic inequality to my women's circles, to my workshops and my retreats. I kind of treat all people the same, right? And
Exactly.
and I know I'm always conscious that, like I have 18 women coming to Circle on Thursday night. I'm conscious, like, even without knowing, I know a lot of the women who've been coming for, a year and a half now. I know them, but like, there's always new women. And even, even if I don't, like, even if I'm walking into a space where I know nobody, I just know because 1 in 3 women in their lifetime, right? I know
Yeah.
that people come with that, with the potential. So I hold space knowing that in that way. And it's not about what I'm never doing is like trauma mining. I'd like, what I'm always doing is saying, and I do this when I start like, chairing, when I do a training or chairing a longer workshop, I always set, like I said, the community agreements are really important. So I say
Yes.
things like, you have the right to pass. If you
Mm.
don't want to participate, if you don't want to do something, the first thing I want you to do, the biggest invitation is to go inwards and begin to listen to your body and then
Yes.
choose from that place. So you have the right to choose, you have the right to pass. Everything is an invitation. There is no
Mm.
expectation from me. And so, if it's if your body's saying no, you listen to that. At the same time, I invite you to try things on. And explore your edges and explore your curiosity. So if the initial is like, no, I don't want to do that, just ask yourself why. So this is
Yeah.
like this curiosity, this willingness to look, this noticing is what I'm inviting people into. Everything's an invitation. There is no expectation. And I bring that into all of the spaces that I hold. I also often say that you have the right to resource yourself because and isn't that a choice? So,
Yes.
if you're in a meeting with me, I'm going to try to help you and support you to resource yourself. So we're going to have breaks. We're going to check in. We're going to do a check in and we're going to do a check out. I'm going to try to hold that space in a resourcing way. And similarly, if you're sitting in circle, I'm going to be like, do you need another blanket? Would you like, listen to your body? What do you need?
Mm.
If you need to go get more tea, go get more tea. Like you'll be all like, you're not going to miss out. You're fine. So like really doing that noticing of what you need and then acting accordingly, choosing
Absolutely.
from that place of heart, from that place of body.
Absolutely. I love that. And within doing that and creating that invitation, you are, I suppose, in a way, creating that safe space, even though, like you say, you can't say I create a safe space because it's not safe for everyone, but just in the fact that you're not forcing anyone to do anything, you're getting people to listen to themselves and their body, and the more that we can go inwards and do that, the more agency we have in our own lives, in our own decision, and that then puts us in a safe space. But it's giving us the power. It's giving that person the power because they're the ones that have the power in within. You are your own guru. No one else can come in and know what's best for you. Only you can do that. And so many people think that they don't have that within them, and everyone looks for things externally. I'll only be happy when, or I need to be told what to do, and from a lot of the systems that we grow up in, from schools and institutions, and it's very much everything's on the outside. And so I love the fact that you do set up a space where you can invite people with curiosity, and even that invitation of visiting something within yourself with curiosity. You have to feel safe in order to do that, but you are creating a safe space to do that. And I think that is one of the most powerful things ever, in all, and like you say, in all of the work that you do, that there's so many crossovers with that. And I think that's really, really rewarding and fantastic. But also for you, when you are holding this space and you're checking in with people, do you need a blanket? Are you okay? Do you need breaks? How do you check in on yourself like that as well? Because when you're holding space and holding meetings and looking after everybody else, how do you make sure that you are looking after you as well? How do you check in with you?
Oh, I mean, it's a practice, right?
Yeah.
There are some times when I'm doing it, I think where I'm looking after myself effectively. I suppose I know much more quickly now when I'm not, right?
Mm.
And so my cycles of like letting things get too much are much shorter. Uh,
Yeah.
and I think so. I was going to say, like, a definition of trauma that I tend to go through in my head is like trauma is too much, too fast, too soon, for too long. And in
Mm.
my world, what often happens is that in with domestic abuse, trauma is also the withdrawal of choice from somebody.
Mm.
That's what coercive control is. It's someone having, taking your choice away from you, from big choices and little choices, daily, monthly, yearly choices taken away from you. And so I think one of the most healing things, without needing to say it's a healing thing, that I can do for someone is help them in a low stakes way
Mm.
um, experiment with choice.
Yeah.
So, a low stakes noticing is like, do I want my eyes open or closed for the meditation?
Mm.
Do I need another blanket? Would I like a cup of tea before circle? Like those kind of things, like, really putting all of my expectation about someone else's experience to the side and asking
Mm.
people to begin to go on that process of choice. And that's what I guess I try to do for myself. So, if I look at where my career was a decade ago to where it is now, I make choices that work for me
Mm.
every single day, um,
Yeah.
and I worry about me, not
Yeah.
other people so much. So, and I mean that with all the love in the world, but I worry about, like, I know how to get the best from me.
Mm.
I don't work super long hours. I work my 9 to 5, and I'm very effective in my 9 to 5. Whereas, at another point in my career, I would get up at like 6 and work till sometimes midnight and work on
Mm.
weekends. You will not catch me doing any of that. That is none of my business. Like,
Yeah.
absolutely fucking not. Like, I am not, that is not what I'm here for. So, I make choices you know, like I cancel meetings. I say no to things.
Yes.
I rearrange if things get, if I'm noticing that my diary is really full because people put meetings in with me all the time. And I will look at, and if it's like, I am not going to, by 3 o'clock, you're going to get nothing from me. So either I cancel a meeting, or in that 3 o'clock meeting, I'm like, I just want you to let you know this is my 8th meeting of the day. My brain's mashed potatoes now, so I'll do the best I can. But we might have to put a pin in this, and I'm going to be realistic, and I'm going to honor our time together. But I'm also going to honor myself, and so I think
Yes.
that's how I do that. So I make better choices. I am a Gemini polymath hummingbird, so a lot of stuff I get really jazzed about. So I still say yes to probably more things than most people. And some people, like, what I guess people's observations of me is like, oh my God, you do too much. And that is true. There are times when I'm like, yep, oh gosh, this is too much now. I need to retreat. I need to get online. I need to go to some Qoya classes with Rochelle. I need to create. I come from a long line of artists. And when things get too much, I usually go into a neurodivergent ADHD creative hole. And I make, handmade rosaries. I go into my journal, which is like never ever far away. I get my journal and I'm drawing, I'm writing, I'm painting, I'm doing something, and slowing things down and checking in with myself. Like,
And would you say that was mixing the masculine and the feminine because you're coming into a meeting with that authority? And it was something that Oprah said. When Oprah goes into a meeting, she goes in, one of the first things she says is she knows exactly, it's like, what do you expect to get out of the meeting? Let's look at actually why we're here so we can use our time effectively. What do you want to get out of the meeting? What are the expectations? What do we need to get out of this? And it was like, yeah. And that was the effect that I felt you had on the workshop at the Witches Festival that made me go, yes, I need to see that today. That's really good. But I love the fact that it's mixing it with that feminine, like you're saying, then you can go and you can take time out, you can do something creative, you can tap into yourself, which would you say that was more the feminine side? So you're really having that masculine feminine balance.
definitely. So a couple things to unpick there. The Okay, I'm just going to make a little note. So perimenopause, my brain doesn't forget. So when I particularly when I run workshops or a circle, and absolutely when even if it's like a half an hour meeting, I usually say, okay, for transparency, the arc of our time together is going to follow this. If I've been the one put in charge of our time together, I think that's respectful. Like
Yeah.
for some people who need to know where they're going and don't, and would like a bit of masculine structure, it's there for them. So
Yeah.
at the beginning of every circle, even if people have been to circle 1,000 times with me, I say, here's what to expect for
Yeah.
transparency. And if you've already forgotten that immediately, that's fine too. If you're just here to sit in the divine feminine hot tub and float around for a couple of hours, you do you. But some
Yeah.
people don't like that. Some people are like, get me the fuck out of this hot tub. I don't like it. Give me some structure. Like I
Yeah.
remember when I went to Sisters of the Wild with Jane Goldhart for the first time. And it was probably 2016 or so. And it was sort of my first like wild woman retreat where like mud on your face and like, women and all sorts of stuff. And I just remember I just kept going up to Jane being like, what's the schedule?
Yeah.
Like, calm down. And I was
That's
like,
the Virgo.
that's the Virgo. I'm like,
Yeah.
I cannot float. No fucking hot tub for me. And it's like for me, so I try to, like I said, I try to give people what I need, but
Yes.
also giving them the invitation to listen to what they need. So like, that's what I do. Like that for me feels like purpose. Like this is where
Yeah.
we're going to go. Where you take yourself, that is up to you. And so what we always talk about, Rochelle Sheik says, the structure, you put a structure in place so that you can have the freedom. And
Oh, yes. I love that.
so with workshops or meetings, but certainly women's circles, like all of my women's circles, I'm just about to hold the 33rd Sacred Chrono Women's Circle this coming Thursday.
Oh, amazing.
I've been running them since April 2023, and it's just a joy of my life to hold the space. And every circle follows the same arc. And that's the structure. That's the masculine.
Yeah.
What changes in every circle is the theme. So
Hmm.
every circle has a different theme. You'll get a different meditation every time. You'll get a different little Meghan talk, which is like a TED talk about our theme. And you'll get a different activity every time, and a different like talking full woman circle question. But the arc, the way we move through that circle, is going to stay the same. So
Oh,
that
I
also
love
helps
that. Yeah,
people.
because it makes people feel safe because they know what to expect. They're not thinking, oh, because a lot of it with women's circles as well is you're going to rock up and not know what to expect. My first women's circle, I was like, oh, wow, this is not for me. Straight away, I was like, whoa. And, I had some sisterhood wounds. It wasn't that brought it up, but, I attended quite a few women's circles before I found my tribe, if you like. So, I went to the first one, I was like, no, and then that put me off for a few years. And then I tried another one. I'm like, oh, still not sure. So it was really just kind of putting the foot in. So I love that. I love the fact that when you've got that structure, you know what to expect. It just puts you in a bit more of a safety zone, even if you don't know the people that are attending.
I think so. And that, I mean, again, that's what works for me. Like there have been
Mm.
people who've probably come into circle and been like, you know what, I want to be in the divine feminine floaty hot tub. And I've been to red tents and women's circles that are like that, where it's
Yeah.
like there's very little structure. There's kind of everyone's just and like and for me that's like that has a place. And actually
Yeah.
like decentering hierarchy is and sort of those types of spaces and like a collaboration across people, like it does have a space. For me, I I think because of my social justice work, like having
Mm.
those community agreements, like, like there's one thing, and if you come to circle, like you know that I'm a stickler on one thing, and I will never interrupt you except if you do one thing, and that is crosstalk. There ain't no crosstalk happening in my circle. And I'll tell you why, okay? So, you know, so what happens is like we women love to help, right? and and sometimes we just can't hold it back.
Yeah.
Help. But what that does is, so like in a circle situation, so one of the things I
Mm.
say is that like we operate a women's circle ethos here. There's no need to fix. You are not broken. And part of that is you do not need to offer anyone anything. And if
Mm.
if you're in a situation where you're doing maybe a partner share, if you want to offer something like some advice or a book you think might help the person, you ask them if you can so they can give consent because maybe they're too full up, right? But especially when we're doing a big circle, right? And like that's the beauty of circle. Like we harvest the collective wisdom. We do one one big share every circle. And you can just see that my story is your story is my story. And everyone kind of threads through as we go around. And you could just see women's hearts vibrating like, yes, I fucking, yes,
Yeah.
that's me. I thank you. And that's good. We can energetically get that. But what doesn't work is when someone from across the circle says, me too, and can I ask you a question? So what that can do is take somebody out of their flow.
Mm.
And I use this example. I don't know if you've seen Agatha All Along. So Agatha All Along, there's a final episode, right? And like there's three witches
Yeah.
in the final episode, and Catherine Hahn, mother Catherine Hahn, is basically like one of the the witches is basically I don't know if she gets sucked into a wall or something, but basically like she's in danger. And then the third witch goes to rescue her. And Catherine Hahn, mother, says, don't steal her struggle.
Yes.
And I just was like, yeah, okay. So I'm not saying anyone's struggling, but what you're doing when you're interrupting, when you're cross-talking, when you're offering, is you're taking that authority away from that woman to speak her mind, to know her truth, to work it out as she goes along. You take her out of her flow and you steal her autonomy.
Yes.
That doesn't sit right with me. Because I'd rather sit in silence for 5 minutes and let that, whatever's happening for that woman, happen. That to me is empowerment.
Yeah.
And so, the only times I ever get a little like, hey now, is
Yeah.
when I'm like, hey now, no problem. And I think that's, those are like, those are and now people who come to Circle a lot, they know. And they can invite each other forward into it with love and humor.
Yes.
Like I don't have to say it. Someone will be like, no, cross up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They felt it. They felt it. And I think all of these are felt sensations. These are somatic experiences that I think we're having. And in the same way, like Qoya, the embodied movement practice I teach, that is a really beautiful combination of structure and freedom.
Yeah.
So the structure, there's 13 pillars to a Qoya class. We move through the structure in the same way, but what changes is the theme. You might notice how I run my women's the theme and the playlist. The playlist changes for every Qoya class. And I think that education in holding somatic space, like a Qoya class is, like I always say, it's like nothing you've ever been to, but it's like remembering everything you've ever done. And in a Qoya class, we start by pulling an oracle card and then sharing with a partner what that oracle card means to us. We have a grounding meditation. We set an intention. We circle that through our bodies. We do a heart opening. We drop down into our bellies and our hips. We do a hip opening. We go back to our intentions and we dance our yoga as prayer. Like, what would it be like to express your prayer, your intention through your body? There's a shadow contrast dance in which we explore the fullness of the theme. So if the theme is gratitude, the shadow contrast dance will be like, well, what does it feel like when you're not grateful in your body?
Yeah.
We do that for one song. We have a bit of a transition, and then we do a somatic shaking, and then we do a bit of choreography, which is usually very straightforward and maybe a little bit of fun, not forced fun ever though. And then we do a free dance to embody the theme. We do another partner share and some stretching, and then rest. And so that's the arc. But every class is going to feel and be different because we're going to be exploring a different theme, and the corresponding songs are going to be different. And so that's really where I got to play around, I think, for the first time with the combination of the masculine and the feminine, the structure and the freedom, and then seeing what really what that could do to me, my body, my feelings, and then doing it like every pillar of a Qoya class. I say this to Rochelle all the time, like every pillar of a Qoya class has become how I move through the world.
Oh,
So,
wow.
I mean, just right here, only just happen to have 3 Oracle decks, just right within arm's reach.
Of course.
I've created 3 Oracle decks. Well, no, I've created more, actually. I've created, gosh, like 6 now, but little mini ones.
Amazing.
So I pull Oracle cards because I feel like an Oracle card is a portal to your intuition.
Yeah.
It's a moment in time where you can take a breath, connect in, and then listen to that inner authority. I meditate. Before I really didn't, even now I said I did not until and I love writing meditations and sharing meditations.
Yeah.
Love it. Like I set intentions. I do
Yes.
things in an intentional way. Like when we circle in a Qoya class, it's about connecting to the 70% of our bodies that are water and that
Yeah.
fluid feminine movement. And so like circling through life, and like Liz Gilbert says, I love this quote, to make something sacred, put a circle around it. Yeah. So like
Yeah.
circling, making things sacred is how I move through my life. Heart opening. Oh my God. Do I like, I have a giant tattoo of a hummingbird on my arm to remind me to be I don't even look at it anymore, because it's to be like, hummingbirds have the biggest hearts for their body size, and it's a reminder to like search for the nectar that I know inherently nourishes myself and live from my heart, like
Yes.
dropping down into my hips, like leading from my belly, my intuition, like moving through life as if life is a prayer, like exploring the fullness through the shadow, like, like looking, being willing and curious to look at the shadow parts of myself, shaking, like knowing when it's time to put things down, even if it's just for a moment, having fun, like choreography, like the choreographed part of a Qoya class is really like connecting to joy, and joy is like joy is one of those tricky feelings, like that it's that's actually one of quite a complicated feeling. So like the choreographed dance is a metaphor for like seeking joy in my life, and then a free dance is like exploring who I am, the fullness of who I
Mm.
am in the moment. Yeah. And all of that done in community, speaking aloud, sharing, and then coming in and resting, like at the end, stretching, like creating space in my body, like creating space in my life, and then coming to the end of a class through rest. Like that's like the pillars of a Qoya class have become how I move through my life. And it is such an amazing gift. It is like, Qoya and who I am are one in the same now,
Yes.
after almost a decade of practice.
That's amazing. And it's interesting, isn't it, when we start to get into our body and you might hear somebody telling you something, or like you say, or you want to, like, for example, at the beginning of this podcast, when I gave you some feedback of when your ears were burning and we were talking about you and what was said, and you accepting that again, that's again dropping into your heart, opening your heart up, even things like that. So, like you say, going through your daily life and putting that into your life, you're connecting with your heart, you're connecting with opening up in these kind of circumstances, not just in a movement class. So yeah, I love that. It's so important.
And I guess I think if there's one kind of way to describe the last decade of my life, is moving into congruence, I
Mm,
guess, and not just about having those moments of intuitive somatic recognition, but
mm.
living my life in that way,
Yeah, so it's flow, it's not rigid. It's not, I'm going to go to do this class now and then that's separate from the rest of our lives.
And now, and I feel like sometimes when I drop back into the sort of those old patterns, I can feel it and recognize it almost straight away.
Yeah.
And so, and like that recognition, that knowledge, I mean, Jesus, that wisdom is the most important thing to me. Like, I'm not saying that, like, life is a spiral, like, and I will spiral through this, like, through, I am who I am, right? And so
Yeah.
like I will spiral through the same things, but those spirals are shorter. And I think about
Yeah.
like the story, about like like how someone's described healing. Like, healing's like you're walking down a street, and the first day you're like, you walk down the street and you fall into a hole. Uh,
Yes.
the second day, you walk down the street and, like you fall into the hole, but you've already figured out how to get out of it. And so you get out of it quicker. The third day, you walk around the hole. The fourth day, you don't even walk down the street, right? And so, like,
Yeah.
that's what it's like, the hole's still there. You know it's there. It's on the other street, but the way you're choosing to engage with it is different. And I think
Yeah.
that's I suppose that's what all of this is a practice, like the way, it's not like I don't overburden my life and sometimes get really over committed to things that I really love to do. It's not that I don't do that. It's that I recognize when I recognize when I'm going down that street a lot earlier, and I program things in. So like I've run 16 retreats from my home in Cornwall, and I only ran one this year. And so I ran a 3-day witch camp in October. And for the first time, I took, so the witch camp was it was from Thursday evening to Sunday afternoon. And I took the Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Well, of course, the Thursday and Friday because I'm running the retreat, but I took the Wednesday before and the
Mm,
Monday and the Tuesday after off from my
good.
main job, right? And, a year ago, which was the last time I ran Witch Camp, it was a shorter retreat, but I only took the Friday off and I didn't even take the Monday off. I was back at 9 a.m. after having this blissful, joyful, witchy weekend at 9 a.m. the next day. I
Wow.
was in a domestic homicide review meeting.
Whoa.
And Ellen, like this was, and so this is what happened. I went into this meeting and I could feel my body like burning.
Yeah.
I was looking at my colleagues who I love and respect, and I was like, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. I got so angry so
Mm.
quickly. And I sat back and I was like, oh, baby, I'm not okay. And so I got through the meeting and I asked my boss to hang on. And I said, hey, now, I'm not all right.
Mm.
I am really overwhelmed. I've noticed in that meeting, I had very little resilience. I've just had a great weekend. Honestly, one of the best retreats I've ever run. Had a great time. This is too jarring. The backdrop to all of this was I was really struggling with my son at the time. He was really struggling. Um,
Yeah.
that was very, very stressful. So not only had I, had my business, my work, and my son was, things were, really stressful with him. But I was also really deep into untreated in any way, shape, or form perimenopause.
Yeah.
And so I just talked to my boss and I said, my mental health is not good. I am not feeling okay. And
Mm.
she said, take the rest of the week off. And I said, so I was like, oh, yeah. Then I said, don't have to ask me twice. Slam down my
Yeah.
laptop. Right? Even like 5 years, 10 years before, I would have been like, out of your mind. How dare you suggest that? I will power through. But
Yeah.
first I was like, that conditioning was like, oh, but you can't. And then my heart was like, oh, fuck yeah,
Oh,
you
yes, you
can.
can. Yeah.
Slam that laptop down. And you know what, Ella, I didn't go back to work for 7 weeks.
Wow.
Yep. And I'd never in my entire life taken sick leave ever.
Yeah.
And like for the first like 2 weeks, I was like, what's going on? What do I do? And my boss was just amazing. She was like, what you do is you sort yourself out. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay. So what I did was basically listen to all kind of parts of myself. Went and saw some amazing holistic practitioners like our mutual friend Ellie,
Oh,
who's
yes.
fantastic. I went through the NHS. I went to Menopause UK, paid for a consultation. Honestly, if anyone's in perimenopause, the best 75 pounds I have spent around on my menopause journey has been to have an hour consultation with the founder of Menopause UK, Steph, who's a doctor. She was amazing. I spent 2 hours on the phone with her. She wrote, we went through everything. And then she wrote me a prescription that I took, wrote me a letter, which I took to my GP. And basically at the beginning of December of last year, I went on HRT. And for me, that has changed my life. So,
Yeah.
I had gotten to the point where I felt like my changing hormones had really affected my mental health.
Mm.
I've been anxious before, right? Like, anxiety's always been a friend of mine. But I'd never been depressed. I didn't know what depression was. Like I never felt it. I could feel overwhelmed. I could feel like,
Yeah.
with my ex-husband, I felt like I was in a cage. Like I felt all these things, but like I've never felt depressed.
Yeah.
But that's how I felt. And I remember like that meeting, I was like, I'm losing the ability to like, I knew I was in perimenopause. I knew that very, very clearly. But what I was losing the ability was to stand on the balcony of my life and be like, oh, it's just the hormones, it'll pass.
Yeah.
That meeting, I was like, I am losing the ability to take a step back here.
Mm.
And I'm afraid for myself. I'm afraid for my mental health. I'm afraid for like, if I continue down this path, I'm afraid for what might happen to me. And I've
Yeah.
never had that experience before. So I took those 7 weeks and, looked at like, and all of my practices that I had been developed over a decade, like they weren't working really either. Like,
Yeah.
my meditation wasn't working. Like my Qoya wasn't working. Like nothing was like really working. And then, I took on, I'm a learner at heart, and took on a lot of information and made a decision, which like, there was also part of me that felt a bit guilty. I'm like, I don't have any, I'm not on any medication. And like, I should be able to do this holistically. And, and some people can. I don't think I would have survived.
Mm.
I don't think I would. I think my hormonal health and my mental health was so poor. Um, and I know that now because it is so much better. So I've
Yeah.
been on HRT for a year, and again, if I look at pictures of myself from a year ago to now, I look like a completely different person yet again.
It's
So,
interesting when you say about the depression as well, because that was the first thing I felt actually when perimenopause started. And I was in complete denial because I was like, oh, I'm not even 40 yet. I can't be going through perimenopause. There's no way. And my mother was saying to me, because it's hereditary, isn't it? So if your mother's didn't deal with menopause very well and your grandmother didn't, and my grandmother and mother definitely didn't, they said they were just going loopy and that they both had to go on HRT. And my mom kept saying, I think you're going through the menopause. And I was like, no way, I'm too young. There's no way. And yeah, and I'd same as you. And I was thinking, no, I'm going to do this holistically. I'm really healthy. But it was the depression. It wasn't until the anger came. Because I'm a Pisces. So I'm similar to you in the way of I'm Libra and Virgo, so Virgo moon, Libra rising, and then I'm like triple Pisces. Loads of Pisces, and my sun sign's Pisces. I'm very fishy, very go with the flow. Um, but yeah, that was difficult because I was like, hang on a minute. Suddenly, instead of just going, whatever, and just letting things just roll like off a duck's back, I was ready to fight. I was getting really offended. I was really angry. And don't get me wrong, some of that was around someone being disrespectful to me, who wasn't used for me sticking up for myself, because they'd known me when I was young, a lot younger, from all my life from childhood. And they hadn't really known me in the last 20 years. So some of it was that and setting a boundary there. So I had every right to be angry. But at the same time, wow, I was so angry. It just completely overtook me. It was like I was seeing red. I was going really hot. I was shaking. It's a good job they live very far away because otherwise I would have got in the car and gone, and I don't know what I would have done. But the hilarious thing is because I've never been in a fight in my life. I've never hit anyone, and I definitely would have lost with that person had I tried that anyway. But I was still willing to give it a go. I was really like, rah. And I remember going and sitting in a restaurant, and it was even just people walking in the door. If anyone looks at me wrong, I just thought, they're going to get it. And I thought, who is this person? Who? Who is this person? This is not me. And that's when the next day I rang up the doctors. And, I think I need to go on some HRT. How long have you had these symptoms? Oh, about 5 years. How old are you? And I think I was 43, 43, 44. And I was like, yeah, I need it. I need it now.
yeah.
And it completely changed my life. Literally within about 10 days, I felt a difference. It was unbelievable.
Right. I again at this. I feel like there's a lot of privilege in being able to access it,
Mm,
being able to fill out a form, pay 20 quid, and get HRT, unlimited HRT for a year.
yeah.
I mean, what a privilege that is
Yeah.
here in the UK. So grateful for that via the NHS.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I think, I guess had I not had that like decade long journey of like, which is of course my whole life, but like especially the embodied journey of the last decade, like I think I probably would have gone on for even longer without noticing what was going on in myself. As
Mm.
it was, like I definitely tried to bare knuckle it for as long as possible,
Yeah.
um, and until it became impossible.
Yeah.
And I got my sparkle back. I felt like, I was dim, I was dim. And I guess I remember saying to my husband, my now husband, different husband. Um, I remember saying to him, like, I fought too fucking hard to lose
Mm.
myself again.
Yeah.
Like having
Yeah.
gone through my first marriage and come out of that, and like, and like was living my full life. And in the 6 months before HRT, that's what it felt like. It felt like it felt like I was losing myself again. And I was like,
Mm.
no, 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 no. I no, 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 no. You're not. We're not
We're
letting you
not
do
going
that.
there.
You're not. We're not losing you again, lady. You know. Um, so yeah, and a year on, oh gosh. And I remember sitting across from my best friend up in Surrey, my, wonderful friend Nat, having, gone over to her house, walked through her door and cried for 6 hours, having
Mm.
come from a really terrible conversation with my son and his dad. And I just remember her just like taking me by the shoulders, looking in my eye, and she said, "Take the fucking HRT. We'll feel better." And,
Yeah.
and then, in all seriousness, she said, "I'm afraid I'm going to lose you."
Mm.
And I said, "Okay, I see that. I received that."
Yeah.
And literally the next day, I wasn't on I'm on the patches now, but I started on the gel, slapped that gel on my inner thigh. And like you said, within a couple of weeks, I was like, "Hey,
Here
who's
she
this
is.
lady?" Right, and yeah, and I haven't looked back. Oh, I'm just so, really so grateful. And, this year, I mean, gosh, we're recording towards the end of December, 2025. And, this year has really been a time. I moved back up to Surrey from January to the end of June to help my son get through GCSEs. And I'm so glad I got that time. By this time last year, I had come back to myself again so that I
Mm.
could support him for the last 6 months, and keep myself centered through what was, quite a stressful time, honestly. GCSEs,
Yeah.
do one. Where are my GCSEs? I don't have any GCSEs, but I feel like I should have one in at least English, maths, and sciences in this
Yeah.
country, for having helped my son so much. But yeah, and this kind of the second half of this year has been, really, 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 really interesting. I get to my husband build us an amazing van. So we travel. One of my favorite things to do. What we haven't even talked about, Ella, is land.
I was
Um,
just getting to that actually. I was just thinking land and rites of passage because yeah, but the land. So you're going away in your van, going and spending time different parts of the UK on the land. Are you visiting stone circles and sacred places and
Oh yes, I love a stone circle. I love sacred sites.
yeah.
So one of the things I would describe myself as a ceremonialist. So
Mm.
I create ceremonies and rituals all the time, daily for myself, and also to honor transitions in people's lives. So I can. I can be at your side through any changes in life, whether that's birth or mother blessings, weddings or hand fastings, and also death and grief.
Mm.
And so, creating ceremonies, again, making spaces and experiences sacred, really is. Again, all of what we've talked about, like drawing a circle around it, creating
Yeah.
art, creating a container, having agreements, making something special for people. I just hand fasted a few weeks ago.
Oh,
It was
beautiful.
so lovely working with them to create their ceremony, and it's such a joy to be with people through life transitions, even if they're more
Yeah.
challenging ones. So I love doing that, and I think one of my biggest inspirations for ceremony and ritual is the land. Now,
Mm.
I grew up on the unceded lands of the Wampanoag, which is now known as Boston, Massachusetts. I grew up in a suburb called Milton, Massachusetts. My parents had 3 kids in 5 years. I'm the oldest. We were very overprogrammed, high achieving middle class kids. What we didn't do was spend much time in nature, although we went camping
Yeah.
every summer because my parents are both teachers. So they had a lot of
Yeah.
time off. So we went camping. And like those summers, like I suppose we were in nature, but it wasn't like, let's go hiking, like let's appreciate nature. It wasn't,
Yeah.
we didn't grow up like that. But it's really interesting because my brother, my sister, and I, we've all found a really deep connection with nature. For me, the my what activated my current levels and depth of connection was meeting my husband, who is Cornish, and coming here 5.5 years ago to meet him for the first time on his land. And before I even got here, before I even came to visit him the first time, like we had met a few times, and then he's like, "Oh, why don't you come down and see my house, and we can have a weekend in Cornwall?" I said, "Yeah, don't have to ask me twice." And he's like, you've had some packages delivered to my house. And I was like, yeah, I just
Have you,
ordered
you've moved in?
I just ordered some books about sacred sites to your house. And he was like, oh. And I honestly, like, I had started to, like, when I was in like Europe and, and Malta and places like that, I got really curious about the divine feminine and, ancient and sacred sites. But I,
And Malta's got some really interesting sacred sites as
yeah,
well.
all the temples are shaped like giant women and you have to enter
Yeah.
their yonis. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. I mean, Malta is full of yonic temples everywhere. It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
And so I kind of had that like interest, like wherever I'd go, I'd be like, oh, is there a temple? I even like going to churches because they're places where people have been bringing the contents of their heart for
Yeah.
centuries. And we know that churches are often built on ancient pagan sacred sites. So
Yeah.
for millennia, people have been taking their stuff to these sacred places. So
Yeah.
I was like, so I looked at the map of where Marcus, my husband, lived, and I was like, hang on a minute. We have at least two stone circles and some standing stones within like 15 minutes of this house. So then I was like, "Ooh, I must." So I ordered a bunch of sacred site books, and that first weekend, I was like, "We've got to go to the hurlers." He was like, "What are the hurlers?" I was like, "You are Cornish.
Yeah.
You 15 minutes from like three stone circles, the cheese ring, and like and a bunch of like other stuff. Like what?" So we went, and I remember standing in the middle, the central circle of hurlers, and looking at him and being like, "I am a sure shit that I'm going to marry you." Uh,
Wow.
and so like, and I just remember like I was so enchanted by this ancient place and so enchanted by this man. And I just felt like this convergence of energy coming through. And I was like, this is wow, okay, this is a pivot. This is going to be a thing. And then that was in 2020, and then lockdown. And so we spent a ton of time in Cornwall. I was living in Surrey at the time, but we spent a lot of time down here in Cornwall in lockdown. And we kind of like took that liberal like driving 10-15 minutes quite we kind of so we would I always say that I love, I wouldn't have chosen to live in Liscard, but I do love living here because we live between the moors and the shores. So it's like about
Yeah.
12 minutes to the Hurlers, to the moor, and it's about 12 minutes to Seaton and Downderry. And so that's where we
Nice.
spent our time. And so particularly in the long second lockdown. And, we were just on the land. And I had,
Mm.
like, during that time, I had canceled many trips, including to Peru, with Rochelle Chic. And I was like, gosh, I've traveled my whole adult life, like, dozens of trips a year. And yet here we were, like, we couldn't go anywhere. And so what the land here in Cornwall taught me is that pilgrimage does not require flights or
Mm.
massive miles. Like pilgrimage and finding the sacred around you and the connection with the land can be just as simple as walking out your front door. And my God,
Mm.
was that the most massive lesson. And then that opened up my journey into land connectedness. I'm third generation American, so my mom's entire lineage comes from Ireland. And so during the pandemic, I got really deep into Celtic studies, particularly Irish Celtic studies. That's my
Nice.
position. I'm not a massive fan of now that I've found the magic in my own lineage and then found the magic on the land I live on. I'm not
Yeah.
a fan of like needing to go. I mean, granted, if someone's like, "You want to go to India?" I'd be like, "I will go to India. I will go anywhere you want to take me. I
Yeah.
will go. I will go." But there's also something, I don't need that. I don't desperately
Mm.
crave that. Like I crave, I crave a trip to Ireland. I do crave a little sacred journey to southern France to the Magdalene sites because she's my homegirl. Um, uh, but I think, that time, like 2020 and 2021, showed me like how deep. It's not about going bigger. It's about
Mm.
going deeper. And how deep can I make my connection with the land that I live on? And that
Yeah.
opened up so many doors for me. And so that second lockdown, we would walk on the moors, we'd go to the beach, and for someone who talks all the time, I was very quiet. And my husband was like, um, "Are you okay? Like, what are you thinking about? And what do you do? Like, what's going on?" And I'd be like, "I'm listening."
Hmm.
And he was like, "Well, what do you?" I'm like, "I'm just asking the land, like every day, what would you have me do?" And listening for the answer. And
Wow.
one of the first messages it said was gather women.
Mm.
And I told him that in like April 2021. And he said, "Okay, well, probably by August, things will be different. Why don't you put out to your community, see if anyone would want to come here for a retreat? We'll open up the house to people. And I messaged, I think, 10 women, and 8 said, yeah, and that's all I could fit. So, we ran the first retreat here in August 2021. And now, like I said, I've run 16 retreats and teacher trainings here and all sorts. And the land so wonderfully, generously, and beautifully holds us. And so, I offer rites of passage in circles, and those rites of passage are very much inspired by the land here, whether that's like fairy rites of passage, crone rites of passage, mother, maiden, dragon rites of passage. That was one, very much channeled on the moors through the sort of fierce feminine land here in the UK, like that dragon rites of sovereignty that I offer,
Yeah.
the witch rites, the self-initiation of witches. Like, I'm not going to tell you how to be a witch. You're going to initiate yourself into being a witch. I'm just going to hold that space. And you know what? I didn't just like come up with that. I feel like I work in right relationship with the land, and spend a lot of time honoring it.
So what drew you to, because I was looking at the different rights that you do. So what drew you towards each of those? Did you feel that it was information coming through from the land, from where you are, or was it a bit of both? Was it research into the rights? Did you have to receive them from someone else first in order to have that kind of permission, if you like, to share that with others? Or was it all intuitive from the land, or?
A combination of everything,
Mm,
Ella, a combination of absolutely everything. So some, like, like the 13th rite of the Munaki, the rite of the womb, I received
yeah.
that in 2017. And the Munaki so generously offer that out to the world as
I'm doing that at the moment, actually. It's
just
beautiful.
amazing. And so,
Yeah.
that's a channeled right through Marcela, I think Marcela Lobos,
Yeah.
and she gives that so generously to us as women and to the world. And so there are those kind of rites of passage that I think are super powerful. There are some of the rites of passage that I offer, like the crone rites of passage I've received from Dr. Karen Ward of the Moon Mana School, where I did some of my circle training. And those are closed, like she doesn't want you to share them on. And
Yeah.
that for me doesn't feel like that's one. She's a teacher, that's her, that's how she does things, that's not how I
Mm.
do things. So
Yeah.
I've created rites of passage, like the father rites of passage, and the maiden rites of passage that I do, and certainly like the dragon rites of passage. Those I can associate those with places, right?
Yeah.
It just felt like this is what's coming through, and this is what's meant to be shared. And if it's helpful for people and it's supportive for people, I'm really happy for folks to share those on, because they don't, like, yes, they've come through me, but I don't feel like they're mine to hold, they're mine to share.
Yeah.
And I've just, I love the idea that we work with the concept of all time is now. And so if we're
Yeah.
like working with like if we're working with those sort of those different like cycles of life, so maiden, mother, sovereign, crone, like we as our life cycles, which is an internal cycle, mirror our other internal cycles. If you're a bleeding person, like your menstrual cycle, which also mirror the external cycles of the seasons and the moon, like all of those cycles, internal and external cycles, are mirroring each other. What that means for me is that if we're working with the energy of like the crone, but you're in your 20s, you're still every month with a lunar cycle or your menstrual cycle, or every year with the seasonal cycle, you still have the ability to tap into that part of you that knows, that inner wisdom, that crone wisdom, that like every time you go through a cycle of life, you learn more, you're a different person. So whether you're 20
Yeah.
or 70, you're crone, right? And so for me, like all time is now. So for me, honoring that part of the women who come to circle feels really important. And like we've talked about, like that masculine, like honoring that masculine part of yourself, because sometimes like when we as women go on these like development journeys, and we're going to honor the divine feminine, like, and then sometimes we really punish or become really negative about the masculine. And that's
Mm.
about, we need both, right?
Yes. Yes.
And I think there's something, especially with the work that I do, I know that, lots of women have really damaged relationships, in particular with the masculine, with men. And so offering
Yeah.
a passage to, like, to honor that part of that masculine part of ourselves, but also to sort of honor the masculine as it's been in our life, or to say a big fuck you to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like to notice it, as opposed to not. So like all of the rites of passage I have developed over the years, have some sort of inspiration either in my own life, but certainly in the land as well. And one of the practices, again, that I learned through Qoya, that I've learned, through the Quiero, has been the practice of a despacho or harikui, which is a nature offering. And that has been, I think, if there's one ritual, one ceremony, one thing that I do on a very regular basis. So if not once, if not once a week, then certainly a couple times a month, sometimes depending on where I'm at. It might be daily, is offering whatever's going on for me, offering and making a nature offering to be in that reciprocal right relationship with the land. And I think, I always say, like, everyone has an experience of making a nature offering. Nature offerings have been with humans through time and space. Rosaries were once nature offerings, like roses and flowers to the divine feminine. And then over time, people began to wear them as necklaces, right? If you've
Mm.
ever picked up a stone on a beach, made a wish, and thrown it into the sea, that's a nature offering. And so I
Yeah.
think that, like, if you've, like, I don't know if you've ever gone up and hugged a tree to feel the energy and to give that some of the energy back, that's a nature offering.
Yeah.
Like that as well, like that's, it's not necessarily a rite of passage, but it's something that I do on a really regular basis. And it's probably like I said, everything in circle is different, but we've done, I think, over the last 20 months, we've probably done at least 3 nature offerings as a group, with different themes, and each one has been a bit different, but still, like, it is a practice that I come back to all the time, because what you do is, like, depending on what kind of nature offering you make, if you do it in circle, usually I, get natural materials, put it around a big piece of paper, whatever we're working with, whatever thing we're working with, we're expressing it out loud, we're blowing it in our prayers into natural ingredients, we're wrapping it up like a gift, and we're giving it back to the sea,
Mm.
or to running water, we're burying it, we're burning it, we're leaving it in a sacred place to decompose, which is why we use, like, local natural elements so it doesn't disrupt the ecosystem.
Yeah.
And it's that being in right relationship, like, whether that's through gratitude or love or honoring the cycles of birth, death, and rebirth, whatever those are, like, that's what nature offerings help me do. It's a really great way to really quickly, like, for me to tap into the wisdom, the nature, and the feeling of being held by this land. And God damn it, do I love Cornwall. Like, I love this land so much, and I'm just so grateful. One of the things, I'll say this, and then I will over to you again, Ella. But like, for my whole life, I've always been a bit different. Like, I love my family. I'm gonna be home for Christmas. I love seeing my family, but I am different from them. I've lived abroad
Mm.
for 25 years. I get to go home to Boston. I still say it's home, even though I've lived now outside of the country and outside of Boston longer than I ever lived there. But I've always been different than my siblings, and I never really felt like I fully belonged in my family. And then, I met my ex-husband and start a family with him. And my God, did I not feel like I belonged in that family
Mm.
either, certainly with him. And it wasn't until I moved here 3.5 years ago permanently did I finally, and then, having married my husband, having started Sacred Kerno, and built this community here, um, I think this is the first time in my life I feel like I belong.
Mm.
And I belong to this land first and foremost. And Cornwall's done that,
Yeah.
given me that sense of belonging. And I am very, very grateful. It's like the gift to me that just keeps on giving. And what all I can do is, like, open my heart to catch up with the messages I receive, and to, again, continue to ask that question, what would you have me do?
Yeah.
Listen for the answer.
Absolutely. And everything you said then, it just resonated so much because I've always said that Cornwall is a really healing place. I feel that people that are drawn here are people that come here to heal and do the inner work. And both times when I lived, because I used to live in Cornwall before and then I went away again, then I moved back again, um, as well as living all over the world. But when I came back from, or I lived in Australia for a long time, when I came back, Cornwall was the first place I moved back to. Um, to live there for the first time. And it was so super healing for me. And I know that I needed to do that for a couple of years. But then I went away. I went back to Bristol, where I spent most of my adult life, to do music, because the music here wasn't happening. But I knew I had to go through this healing process and a complete shedding process and a divorce and lots of other stuff in order to return back and start to share my music and do creative things and what I love. But what I noticed when I returned, I did 5 years of that. And when I returned back in 2019, and it wasn't even really planned. It just kind of happened. And I was just going to move back for a year, and then I was going to move back to Bristol again. And within 2 weeks of arriving, I was like, no, I'm not going back. That's it. This is it. This is home for me now. I'm done. This is it. This is home. This is where I am. And it felt like such a strong pull that I've never thought of going anywhere else. And I've always said, I can't really imagine living anywhere else anymore, So, I mean, I think I've done about 8.5 years in total, but I noticed that, and this happened before when I lived here before, is going into so much personal healing, and also even as a profession, I was an Ayurvedic therapist and a practitioner. But as soon as I went back to Bristol, I went straight into city mode and music. But coming straight back here, I returned straight back to the land. I live next to a river, and connecting a lot with water and the river and the trees and the sea. And I met my husband on the beach, and I'd ham fasting on the beach and all of that. So I feel like I'm fully cemented here now. And it just the land and the healing. And I love what you said about, yeah, when you listen, you really connect in. When we switch this off and we feel with our heart on our whole body and our grounding. I have to do a lot of grounding, and because otherwise I'm all up here. And that was so important to me, because suddenly it's like, not only am I feeling in my body, but I am fully grounded in the earth. And I will stand outside on my really super muddy lawn, because we've had quite a bit of flooding at the moment. And I will still go and literally put my feet in the mud. I've got worms around my toes, all sorts. And initially, I remember feeling these wiggly worms and thinking, oh, 'cause as an adult, as a child, you don't think about it. As an adult, you're like, oh God, am I comfortable with this? And then going, this is nature. This is part of who we are. We're all the same, and we have to respect this. And I get to the point where my feet would be in the earth, and I'd kind of feel a little bit bad that the reason the worm's probably moving is because I'm treading on it, and it's getting a bit like, oh, really? Or it's coming up for the warmth of my feet. I'm not quite sure which, but I just let it find its own way, and it would go on its way. And even just getting into that, connecting with that childlike energy again of, oh, well, so what if my feet are muddy? And yet I was spent a lot of time in the suburbs and in the city when I was growing up. So, and my nan was very well dressed. She would never ever have me out there with muddy feet. So it was really just getting back into that playfulness, doing my shaking and noticing that there was, splatting mud everywhere, and going, it's fine. I can just go in the shower in a moment and wash it all off. It doesn't matter. It's about that connection with the earth and feeling fully grounded and connected, and listening to the lessons. And like you say, asking, what is it that I need to know?
Yeah.
And I found all my greatest lessons have been through that. And which is why I'd like to leave you with this last question. And before I can also tell our listeners how to work with you and what you're up to over the coming months as well. But first, I really want to ask you this question while we're on the subject of connecting in with the land and asking it questions. What would you say is your biggest lesson that the land has taught you? What's the biggest piece of information, if you like, that you've got from the land?
You don't have to do this alone.
Yeah.
I think that's a message I hear often,
Mm.
and I take that on. I take that into heart. It's a message I've said to survivors of domestic abuse. I've
Yeah.
said to my friends, and had to really learn for myself, is that in our incredibly like capitalistic, individualistic society, like we don't have to do this alone, nor should we. And
Yeah.
so when I hear that from the land, when I like what that means to me is that the land has my back. Cornwall has my back, has my
Yeah.
heart, has my back. I don't by default do the work I do alone. I do it held by Cornwall. And equally, I don't have to go through life on my own. Um, Community is really important to me. I'm a connector. I'm a community connector, community builder. So doing this work and sharing these practices in circle and in community and building community also is what I take from that I don't have to do this alone. Also, like I can be in a partnership and a marriage as someone who has a lot of interests and a lot of energy. My life is made better and more enriched by sharing love with my husband. And so all of that is like that. I am absolutely not alone. And I
Yeah.
have allies and love and friends and community, and all of that gets held and hugged in a very tender way by Cornwall.
That's beautiful. I love that. And how can people get hold of you? Have you got any things that are coming up? Because you said about you doing a Qoya training. You're a Qoya trainer as well.
Yes, I don't have any plans yet in 2026 to do any training. We tend to kind of, I did did one last year and the year before, like a big training. But hopefully there'll be some teachers who will want some training in 2026. What I'm offering the most right now, like I said, I run 2 circles a month from my home studio in Liskeard in Southeast Cornwall. Every other Thursday night, we have a gathering of women for circle. I run workshops as well. So there's a workshop on the 25th of January where we're going to be making charm divination oracle sets. So if you're anything like me, like shiny things, it's like a crow magpie oracle where you can just
Yeah.
use charms and then it's a divination tool. So that'll be fun. On the 8th of February, I'm collaborating with the wonderful Tracy Teague, and we are running a day-long retreat again from my home, which includes sound bath, sound therapy, a bit of movement, a bit of Qoya, women's circles, and then a ritual. The theme of the retreat is hearts break to open. And so we
Beautiful.
are looking at the ways that one of my collaborators and dear friends, Claire from Moon Pottage Pottery is going to be making us ceramic hearts. We're going to break those, write some messages on the inside of the broken pieces and put them all together with some gold glue, like kintsugi type of glue.
Oh,
So there's that. My everything's on my website. So all of the events that are available in 2026 are on my website, which is meghanfield.com. I'm on Facebook and Insta. I'm Meghan Elizabeth Field on Instagram, Meghan with an H, my full name, Meghan Elizabeth Field. On Instagram, I'm pretty active on there, or I try to be. I'm Meghan Field on Facebook as well. There are lots of ways. But if you have any questions, honestly, just please get in touch. Really happy to have a conversation. And yeah, and if we are an open circle, which means that if anything that I've said is piqued your interest, please do come along to a circle. The women are great. Some come to every circle, some ebb and flow, and it's a really nice supportive community we have. And I look at the kind of the circles and the community as a river, and I've been really really, gosh, like my heart's just exploded with all of the different tributaries that have come off of the river, whether those have been women who've met in circle who are now like really good friends, women who've come to circle, had an idea and then pivoted. Like you're never going to get from me like blow up your life, do like the most, like, oh, you're not happy, like totally leave your career and do this. Like you're not going to, that I'm not your
yeah.
not your woman for that. But what I have found is that within that circle, within that invitation to get clear on who you are and how you move through the world, people have gone out into the world and made really awesome decisions about how they want to live their life. From again, like starting a pottery studio or doing a crowdfunder for a pottery studio in Liskeard, to opening up a blacksmith forge, to making a choice to take that vacation, to run their first workshop, to return to their child love for photography. Like I've just watched women come back to themselves through Circle, and make friends and and be part of a joyful, supportive community of women. And so, yeah, if you're at all interested, come along, come and meet us, and you'd be very, very welcome. All of you are welcome here.
And I can't wait to come and join one. I'm really, really excited at that. So I will be definitely doing that in the new year for sure. I will put all of your links and everything into the show notes as well. So wherever you're listening to this podcast or watching this podcast, go to the show notes. I will put them on my website as well, but they will be in the description of the podcast that you are listening to. Meghan, thank you so, so, so much for joining us today. And as a closing invocation, I'm going to invite us just to treat this moment not as an ending, but as an initiation. So, what you may have heard today, rippling gently through your body, as we've talked about getting from the head down into the body, may you remember that your voice matters, not because it's loud, but because it's true. As Meghan has shared with us today, may you listen to your body as a wise and ancient guide, and may you feel that belonging and that connection to the land, not as something that we earn, but something that lives inside of each and every one of us already. You have the power within you. And thank you so much for listening. Thank you for remembering. And may you leave this space with more of who you are and the wisdom that's been shared today. Thank you so much.